this is the Provoked Prawn, and you've managed to get yourself a brand new graphics card, you lucky devil you. And this is a tips and tricks video to talk to you about the installation process for your brand new shiny graphics card. The things to do both before and after the setup process to make the most of it. The simple setup process for how to install it, and also tips in Windows for both optimizing both before and afterwards. In this video, I'm going to be using a number of different bits of hardware for demonstration purposes, and I'm mostly going to be showing off Nvidia's graphics cards with the RTX lineup, but you will also find that these tips are also applicable to AMD cards as well. So obviously one of the first things you want to do is get the graphics card out of the box. Before you even start there though, there will be some tips in a minute for things to do in Windows on your machine with its previous graphics card in. In this video I'm assuming that you have either a pre-built machine or one that you built yourself a while back and you're looking for some tips on how to upgrade, and so I'm going to talk to you with that logic there. So we have the graphics card, obviously the shiny 3090 you can see here. You might have a different one, but the process is roughly the same, so don't worry, we're going to talk through. One of the things to bear in mind is making sure that you're well grounded. You either have an anti-static mat or a wrist strap, that you've grounded yourself, or that you've got your PC plugged into the wall but powered off. But before we do any of that, the first thing I'd recommend is downloading Display Driver Uninstaller. This is a free piece of software that you can use on your machine to remove any remnants of your graphics drivers as they stand currently. I'm assuming that because you bought a new graphics card, you're upgrading from an older model, a previous generation, either Nvidia or AMD, and maybe you're switching to AMD from Nvidia or vice versa, and you're moving between the different manufacturers and going through to a new level. So the best thing to do is to use this tool to remove any remnants of previous drivers. You might have multiple installations over time, and this will delete all those drivers from your machine. What this means is that it cleans things up so that when you go about the process of installing the new graphics drivers, you're getting the cleanest possible install, there's no conflicts, and everything will run really smoothly. You can see from the various options in here that you can set it to remove everything, including all the physics files, previous backups, and other things like that. You'll also see some warnings that you should use this in safe mode. It really depends on the situation. If you're finding that you're having particular problems with your graphics card installation, it might be worth booting into safe mode and using DDU. However, I've found that for the most part you can just use it in Windows and you can set it to remove what you want to. So you can see that you can select what type we've got. So we're selecting GPU and Nvidia from here because I'm removing an Nvidia GPU and installing a new one. And there's an option for clean and shut down for the case of installing a new graphics card on the left there, and you'll see that. So once you've gone through this process, obviously it's going to delete all the files off of there, all the drivers will be removed, and then it's going to shut down the PC. When you're at that stage, you then obviously need to remove all the cables from the PC, take your HDMI or DisplayPort cables out of the original graphics card that's already in there, and make sure everything else is disconnected and that it's not plugged in and turned on at the mains, because obviously you don't want to get electrocuted while doing that. Take off the side panel and remove the power cables for the graphics card. We're just disconnecting them from the right hand side, and you can see them loosely over here. We're not going to take them out the back of the case obviously, because we're going to need them for the new graphics card. And then we're going to remove the screws from the left hand side. This setup is going to vary from case to case. In some cases you'll find these are just thumb screws that are holding it in place. In others, as you can see here, you require a screwdriver. There's usually just 2 required on the back plate, which will keep it in place. This helps with sag, so it's really important to install these and make sure that the graphics card is secured well in place. And obviously we're going through the removal of the original one here. So this is a 1070 Ti GTX graphics card that I'm removing from this case. Once you've got it unscrewed, it's now in a position where you can remove it. Now what you will find is there is a little clip in the top PCIe slot on your motherboard. Here's an example of one outside of a case, but you can see the little clip here. You basically need to push that down in order to disengage it, and that will then free up the graphics card. There's a button on this motherboard that lets you press it and release that, but for most older ones you'll need to get behind there and push that down. It can be a bit fiddly, but once you've done it you can then pull the graphics card out. If you find it won't come out and it's just hard to remove, that's because that clip hasn't been pushed down properly. You'll need to get something in there, hopefully your finger, to push that down. It's worth noting that installing your graphics card you should always try and use the top slot on your motherboard the very top PCIe X16 slot, because that usually has the fastest speeds and ensures that your graphics card will run as it should. So now I've reinstalled a new graphics card. In this case, it's a 3060 Ti, but you obviously have seen there are other options. And I am once again installing it here, this time with thumb screws. So this case that I'm demonstrating with B-roll here has some thumb screws that hold it in place. But again, you need to make sure that these are secured down. This will hold the graphics card in place. Now with the 3060 and the Founders Edition card, there's a special adapter for the cables. So you can see the multi-pin power cables here. Those plug in via an adapter. But you can see there are several pins that need connecting, and I have some power cables that I've already run from the back of my case that are there with the previous graphics card that was installed. Now, the number of pins will vary. You'll find, for example, I only need one lot of connections here from the PCIe power connections, but some other graphics cards require a bit more. Now, hopefully, if you built this case or you had it pre-built for you, you should have a selection of other cables. You'll see the cables that you need here. Essentially, they usually have one Type 4 connection on one side, and they'll either be marked Type 4 or PCIe, and then on the other end you'll find two lots of connectors, and they are generally split. You'll find them coming in with 6 pins and then 2 extra pins as well, so you can basically have 2 lots of 8 pins on one end. They will plug in on the power supply unit to the PCIe connection, so you'll see them marked on these 2 Corsair power supply unit, for example, and they're marked as PCIe connections, so you need to make sure they're plugged in there. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is because you might find that your newer graphics card requires more power than the previous one, so you might need to find a cable. If you haven't got the cables, no fret, because you can get cable kits. For example, this Pro PSU cable kit from Corsair includes a multitude of fancy cables, as well as several PCIe cables that you can see included. We need to make sure, obviously, when we go through the installation process, that you remove any plastic brackets on the graphics card. I should have mentioned that earlier as well. Don't try and plug it in without that. But here you can see as a demonstration, this 3080 from MSI has 3 lots of power connections required. That's 3 8-pin PCIe power connections to run this bad boy. That is a lot of cables. So we need to dig out the extra cables from our power supply unit, or hopefully you've got those cables knocking around your house, or you might have to purchase some extra. You can plug them into a modular power supply unit, run them back through to the front of the case, and then connect them up. You can see me doing it here. I have a multitude of those very fancy premium PSU cables from Corsair that I'm running into the front and then connecting up. Be sure to connect up all of these. Now be very careful, because some of the cabling is a bit fiddly, because you usually have the 6-pin connection and then the 2 extra connectors are a bit separated, so you sort of have to push them together and clip them in and then push them all in. You need to make sure that all of the connections are fully in there. If you find that 2 of the 8 aren't connected in properly, then you might find there are system problems and your machine doesn't run as you'd expect, which is obviously not ideal. So we're obviously powering it on and making sure that it's working before we go about the process of plugging everything back in, your keyboard, your mouse, your monitor. Make sure you plug in the monitor to the graphics card rather than your motherboard, and then go and download the latest drivers. Get them straight from Nvidia or AMD from the website, and be sure to select the correct ones for the graphics card that you have installed, and then download and begin the installation process. I'd recommend, if you're using Nvidia, to get GeForce Experience as well, because it makes future updates really easy. And also for this installation process, I'd click to perform a clean installation, and I do this every time I install a new graphics driver. That just makes sure that everything is clean and up to date, and you've got the latest drivers without any conflicts. If you do have any problems, as I said, you can use DDU to be more thorough with it. Now, another few things that I'd recommend doing once you first get this set up, especially if you have an RTX series graphics card, is to search for game mode within the Windows Start menu and turn that on. There's also an option for hardware accelerated GPU scheduling. You can again find this from the graphics settings within Windows. If you just press the Windows key and search for graphics settings, you'll find them there, and you'll see hardware scheduling. And there's also a performance preference. Go for Microsoft Store app, NVIDIA control panel, and set it to prefer high performance. I've done a video separately on all the different things that you can improve your GPU to get maximum FPS out of it, so I'll link to that in the description, or go into a bit more detail on these sorts of things. but these are my recommended settings for making the most of your new GPU. Find the power settings, for example, and the power and sleep settings, and select ultimate performance if you really want to push the limits of your machine and you're going to be using it for a lot and for gaming and for high-end tasks. Another thing that I'd recommend doing is making sure that you have the display settings set up correctly. You can do this by right-clicking on the desktop and clicking on display settings and then go into the options there. If you have a fast refresh monitor, whether it's 120 Hz, 144 Hz, 240 Hz, 360 Hz, be sure to set that up in here and the display settings. Make sure it's set to the right refresh rate. As standard, it will default to 60, so you might not be making the most of your graphics card and your monitor, and it'll be a real shame. Another thing you can do is you can go into Nvidia's display control panel, and there are a number of settings in here worth changing. I'd recommend, for example, under Manage 3D Settings, that you turn on Nvidia low latency mode and set that to ultra. That will help with your performance in game. And if you go to the change resolution mode, if your monitor is able to do it, you can also set it to output at 10-bit color. You can see that as the default color settings were just 8-bit and now they are set to 10-bit, so I get a much richer color. This is obviously going to vary from monitor to monitor, but it's worth checking these settings and making sure they're set up. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Hope you found this video useful. Thanks for watching. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Hope you found this video useful, interesting, hilarious, or otherwise. Take a look at these other videos that I think you might find interesting as well. And have a look at the description for links and other information you might find useful. Click that join button to see the benefits of being a member of my YouTube channel. And most importantly, have a great life.